In a previous episode of CodeDependent, we talked about how to do programmatic animation of a scroller viewport so that you could do your own animation instead of relying on the default animation that we have when you actually click the track or the up and down buttons of a scroll bar. In this episode, we want to see how to do that for a text area. It turns out to be a little bit different. So we have similar code for the text area as we did previously, where you've got the text area here. When you do scrolling animation, we do it by default. This is just what's built into the SDK. And you can see, by the way, that it's actually helpful to have scrolling, an animation effect on the scrolling, because it's obvious when you're doing the stepping up and down what direction the text is moving. And that's because we're sort of moving and animating it incrementally. So kind of nice UI feedback. So what if you wanted to do the same thing? So when you click on the end button, you'd actually like to scroll to the end. So we put similar code in this application as we did before and said, OK, well, let's animate the viewport area and set the vertical scroll position, all that good stuff. So we click on the end button, and absolutely nothing happens. So that was my first attempt to actually make this work, was to say, well, it worked over there for scroller. Surely it will work for text area. And it turns out to not do that. So just to show how we set up the UI, we have a text area with a bunch of text here. That's all straightforward. We automatically get a scroll bar in there, so we didn't have to do anything there. We've declared a couple of animations, and this is exactly as it was in the previous episode, where we're going to target the viewport of the scroller area. We're going to set the vertical scroll position of that area to the appropriate value, be it 0 or the content height, so that it'll go to the beginning or the end of that scroller area in the text area. But you'll notice over to the left in Flash Builder that we have some warnings here. And it says, you're trying to bind to something that I don't know how to bind to. And the problem is that the scroller and the viewport properties of text area are not actually exposed as bindable properties, which means that the animation can't pick up changes in those values. And what we're trying to do here doesn't really work, because it's not going to be able to actually bind to those properties and set values on those properties appropriately. So the animation that we're running doesn't actually do anything. So what you need to do here in this particular situation is more dynamic animation. So not simply declarative stuff where you say this is the property in the target object that we're binding to and animating on, but instead you need to actually do some programmatic animation instead. Now, I should point out this may actually change. We're in development in Flex 4. We're sort of nailing down the final features and bug fixes as I'm speaking. So maybe in the end these actually will be bindable objects on the skin, and you'll be able to access them and do this kind of declarative animation. But there may be other situations in which you can't, because the right properties and the right target objects are not exposed as bindable. So you need to find another way to do it. So in this case, we do it by actually creating the animation on the fly. So we have buttons similar to the way that we did before. So here was my trivial attempt, which didn't work at all, where the buttons of scrolling to the top and scrolling to the end would play these animations that I had declared. So that didn't work at all. So we'll comment those out and uncomment this code, which is the other approach, where we say, OK, when we click, we're going to call this function scroll to, and we're going to scroll to 0, or we're going to scroll to the content height of the viewport area. And that will call this function that's in script code above. And it says, OK, I'm going to scroll to whatever end position they passed me. I'm going to go ahead and create an animate object on the fly, and it's going to target this object, the scroller viewport, which you'll notice is exactly what I was trying to do in the declarative animations below. But in this case, that actually works because I'm doing it dynamically. This doesn't have to be bindable. I'm actually just passing in a reference to the viewport. So it all works flawlessly. Then we create our motion paths object, which defines the properties and the values that we're actually going to animate with this animation. We say, OK, well, I want this new motion path, and it's going to operate. It's going to have a single motion path in the vector that's going to operate on the property name of vertical scroll position, which, again, is exactly what we were trying to do in the declarative animation. But this time it actually works because we don't depend on it being bindable. And we're going to set the keyframes in that object to be the 0's keyframe is just going to grab the position of the object wherever it happens to be. So we don't actually declare a value for this keyframe. It's just going to go out and grab the value dynamically. So it happens to be in the middle of the scrolling area. That's fine. It'll go ahead and grab that as its starting position. And for the ending position, it's going to pass in the end position that was passed into the function up above. And then we play the animation. So it's exactly what we were trying to do with the declarative animations down below, but we're just doing it dynamically so that we never have to bind. Instead, we just pass in the reference to the object, pass in the value that we want to scroll to. We hook it all up with the new animate object that we've declared, and then we play the thing. So if we run this application, then this time it works a little bit better. So that was dynamically scrolling a TextArea object. If you want to see the code for this application or related applications, check out my blog at graphics-geek.blogspot.com.